apparently some animal mutilations. It chased them into Point Pleasant. And as they were going toward the car, this thing rose up from the ground. It scared the hell out of Marcella. She actually dropped her infant child.
On today's episode, we're going to be sitting down with Steve Ward, who is a Mothman researcher who lives in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Now, Steve's been researching this phenomena for almost 50 years. And the interesting thing about Mothman is I don't know that we've really progressed much in those 50 years. Since the first person reported seeing it till today, there's not a whole lot of new information that's coming out about Mothman. And that could mean a couple of different things. Maybe people are on drugs. Maybe people are imagining it. Or maybe this thing really is real, but it's so fantastical that we really haven't even been able to wrap our head around what this thing is. Put your headphones on, keep driving, whatever it is you're doing, but we really hope that you enjoy this episode about Mothman. First off, Steve, welcome to the Ghost City podcast. I really appreciate you bearing with us and getting the show going.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So where are you from, Steve?
Originally, I'm from Michigan, but right now I'm living in West by God, Virginia, in Point Pleasant, home of the Mothman.
Right in the epicenter of it.
I actually live on the same road that the two couples were chased on November 15th, 1966, out of the TNT area when they saw the Mothman, whatever it was.
Yeah, I think that's the big question, whatever it was. Like there's so much, what is it kind of thing going on. But Point Pleasant, that, if I'm not mistaken, that point of West Virginia, you actually have a lot of weird stuff going on in that area. I think that, that's one of the areas that's known for Bigfoot and all that kind of stuff. You got a lot of cryptid type activity going on there, right?
West Virginia is full of oddities. Back in 1952, they had the Flatwoods Monster, a very strange, we don't even know what the heck it was. But during the time of the Mothman in the mid-'60s, that we had sightings of this creature or apparition, whatever it was. And there were UFOs, plentiful, strange lights going overhead, men in black encounters, apparently some animal mutilations, poltergeist phenomena. It was really a three-ring circus of the paranormal.
Well, that sounds like the best place to be. I was actually driving up through West Virginia not too long ago, and I saw the sign for Flatwoods, and then of course I went up that way. It ended up going up through Weston, like where Trans-Allegheny and all that kind of stuff is. I'm from your area of the country. I'm from Southwest Pennsylvania, actually, so not too far away. But I'm not going to bore the audience with the details of my stupid life. Let's get into Mothman. So, I think that the public has a pretty good, or at least a lot of people have an idea of what they think Mothman is. But can you take us back to the 60s when, the Mothman legend really started to be known? Because I think at the end of the day, a lot of people were just wondering, what the hell is this thing?
Well, it was funny because even back when the film came out in 2002, John Keel, who wrote the Mothman Prophecies, was on Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell. And Art Bell confessed he didn't know anything about the Mothman. And I've been living Mothman for years. I was going to the church of John Keel, so to speak. And I thought John Keel was kind of being forgotten about at that time. But the first major sighting, if not the first sighting, was November 15th, 1966. The Scarberrys and the Mallas, two married couples. They were driving through what has been nicknamed the TNT area for decades. It was the West Virginia Ordnance Center or something like that. Anyway, if you look at the old black and white photographs from the 40s, that's where they were creating explosives for World War II. And they would store them in these, there were 100 of these concrete bunkers or igloos, as they're called. And by the 60s, the mid-60s, most of it had been dismantled. But the old North Power Plant was still standing, even though it was a ruin, and kind of dangerous to wander through because it was falling apart. Well, these two couples were out there. Now this is the McClintock Wildlife Area now. It became a kind of a lover's lane I don't know if it was probably before the 60s. But they were driving through. And what they would do is they would sneak up behind people that were parking, turn on their headlights, and scare the hell out of them. So that was apparently there wasn't much to do in Point Pleasant in the 60s.
Funny enough, I had that happen to me growing up in Southwest Pennsylvania. I'm not going to say what I was doing with a woman in the backseat of that car, but we were on public game lands and somebody did that exact same thing to us. And you say that was the first thing that popped in, because it scared the shit out of me. I'm like, what the hell?
We'll wait for the DVD extras on that one.
Right, exactly.
But they were passing the old North Power Plant on a dirt road. The plant was demolished in the 90s, but and it's right next to the fairgrounds right now. And right across from there is where we start, I'll talk about later, the Mothman hayride at the Mothman Festival. But they're driving down this dirt road, and Linda Scarberry said, "What's that man doing standing in the middle of the road?" And then that man spread his wings by about 10 feet. They noticed it had red glowing eyes, and it shuffled off toward the old North Power Plant. Well, this is an abbreviated version, but they decided to get them out of there. It was Roger Scarberry that was driving.
Now, did they say if it walked off or if it flew off?
I'm sorry?
When they said it spread its wings and went off in the direction of the power plant, did they say?
They just kind of spread out. It did not take off at that point. But they left, went down the dirt road, made a right on Fairgrounds Road, and then made a left on Route 62, which takes them back into town. There was a billboard sign there, and they saw this thing again, or maybe its cousin, we don't know. And then it chased them into Point Pleasant. And they went to the police department, all freaked out. They were separated, told their stories. The handwritten accounts are actually in the Mothman Museum, which has been established by Jeff Wansley, who grew up there. And they told their story. That particular incident hit the wire services all over the world. And that's why I read about it when I was a kid in Michigan in junior high school. And this is even before Mothman had a proper name. They were just calling it the bird.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a crazy story. It's easy to understand why the wires would pick something up like this, especially in the 60s. This is, you had a lot of weird stuff going on in the 60s, the Cold War, all this other stuff going on. Because I know that some people try to even tie Mothman to that, the Cold War and all this stuff. But
there's a lot of conspiracy stuff that I don't think I buy into.
Right.
But it's just definitely one of these high strangeness areas where several different things seem to be going on in the same place.
So when they say, it followed them back into town, obviously if they were driving, I'm assuming this thing wasn't running behind them. So is that where the flight aspect of the sighting starts?
It was right overhead. And recently now, many of these witnesses gave initial interviews back over half a century ago. And then some of them just shut up completely, and some shut up for over 50 years. Roger Scarberry, the man driving the car, Jeff Wansley had been trying to get a hold of him for a long time. In fact, they were neighbors in Point Pleasant. Jeff was the paper boy for Linda Scarberry when he was a kid. But last year, Roger Scarberry came out of the clear blue and talked to Jeff, and he said, I'm really tired of hearing people talk about what happened to me, and they're getting it wrong. So he gave Jeff a full, long-form interview of what happened that night. I was in on part of that, but it's under, I'm afraid, double secret probation. It's going to be in Jeff's next book, which we're all waiting for. And the one thing I can tell you is that the day before when he set up the interview with Jeff, Jeff said to Roger, Roger, just tell me, did it really happen? And Roger said, it scared the hell out of us. And then, I don't know if you've read the book, The Mothman Prophecies, but one of the early witnesses was a young lady named Connie Carpenter. She was about 18, still in school, and she was driving by the Mason County Golf Course, and she sees this thing. Now, the description is roughly humanoid, 6-7 foot tall, red glowing eyes that seem to be kind of sunken down into the chest, almost like a giant owl, and a 10-foot wingspan. This thing took off like a helicopter without flapping its wings, flew over her car. So anyway, she came forward recently and gave another full interview. So we're all anticipating Jeff's next book, which has been on the back burner for some time.
I mean, what they're describing, that would scare the hell out of me too if it happened, to me. I think one of the things I struggle with Mothman as opposed to other cryptids, like let's compare it to Bigfoot, for example, right? Like in my mind, like the Bigfoot thing seems plausible, but when you add the wings onto it, and I know that might not make a difference in the grand scheme of things, but that makes it seem harder to believe. Not that I'm calling them a liar or anything like that. Please don't get me wrong, but it just seems so fantastical that this flying humanoid figure would be, scaring these people. Like, are there any thoughts about what this thing actually is?
Well, that brings up a lot of things. There are actually many Bigfoot reports that a high degree of high strength involved with them. There are even some out in the Northwest where people have claimed to see them with wings, calling them a bat squatch.
Right. I've heard that before.
I don't know how wings lift up anything like that. But the thing is that if people ask me what the Mothman was, I have to say I don't know. And then I go through the different types of experiences people have had. The general description holds true. Once in a while, people report something like a big bird or even a big ugly bird. Tom Urey, one of the early witnesses, saw essentially a thunderbird. He did not see the Mothman. Originally, he thought the others saw the same thing he did, but due to the freakout factor, added the details. Once he actually talked to some of the other witnesses, he rejected that and figured they'd see different things. But here's the thing. Whatever this was, it did seem to leave footprints around the old power plant. John Keel found some. However, when it would take off sometimes, it wouldn't always flap its wings, so it doesn't make any sense. It has a 10-foot wingspan. This thing's 6-7 foot tall. Biologically, could those wings lift something like that up? Also, Keel found, and then there was another researcher named Franzen, a Swedish researcher, that followed Keel in about a year or two later. They found that many of the witnesses were experiencing classic poltergeist phenomena in their home after they'd seen this thing. There are some people, I'll get to that a little bit more later, that had missing time around this thing. When we talk about ghosts, there was a preacher, a Reverend Gray. He's featured on the Mothman of by Small Town Monsters. He tells his story. I talked to his wife, Pat Gray, who wrote a book called The Thing. They were missionaries. This Mothman stuff had just broken, but they hadn't seen the newspapers. They were due to go the next day. Pardon my cat.
That's all right.
Cat's name is Keel, by the way.
We're animal lovers. It's all right. Yeah.
Okay, come on, guy. Hey, this is my show, dude.
Right. He's like, no, I'm my show now.
Again, there was the missing time. There was the poltergeist aspect. And then the weirdest was the Grays. Reverend Gray talks about how they were in their bedroom at night. This thing manifests like an apparition. 6-7 foot tall, red glowing eyes, 10-foot wingspan, just like a classic Mothman. And it's there for a while, and then it dissipates. Now, in their context, they viewed it as something demonic. Unfortunately, the next day, they went off to be missionaries. They didn't read about the Mothman until a couple of years later when they got back. They thought, my God, this is what we saw in our house.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that lends a lot more credibility to this phenomenon. If they had read about it, seen it in the papers and everything, and then claiming to see it, that might have influenced what they're claiming to have seen. But if you're saying that they didn't even know anything about this phenomena and then it pops up in their bedroom, that lends a little bit more credibility. Right.
Well, it did seem to be paraphysical. It did seem to be physical to some degree. Some even said when it was chasing the car that its wings hit the side of the car and made a noise. And supposedly Roger Scarborough went out to make sure it hadn't dented his beloved Chevy afterwards. But and also there was in the Mothman prophecies, there was my cat's just here for comic relief. So don't worry about
trust me, it's fine.
There was a town official. It turns out was a banker. He hears something. He goes outside and he sees this thing standing on his front lawn. He misses about 10 to 20 minutes in the trance, doesn't know what happened. I know a lady, another Mothman witness in Sigmund. She was 16 and April 1967. She and her boyfriend were about 12 miles north of Point Pleasant, sitting on the hood of the car looking at the sky. They saw a strange light moving overhead, and then that went away. And then there was another light, and I think it was more solid, more like a craft. Her boyfriend decided, let's get out of here. She wanted to stay, wanted to see it. So she's looking out the window as they're driving away. She sees what looks like the Mothman flying next to this thing. And then after that ordeal, they get home, they find out they're missing 2 or 3 hours of time. So in a couple of cases, people see this thing in conjunction with some kind of strange light or whatever. Like John Keel wanted to get away. He did not think these things were necessarily extraterrestrial. He thought this was something natural to the planet. So he used the term ultra-terrestrial to kind of get away from that idea.
Right. Yeah, that's why I was curious. Like, do especially you that you have been researching this so long, do you feel that it is like a carbon-based life form, like, kind of like another cryptid, or is it, because some of this stuff that you're describing, it does kind of come into our world, the world of ghosts and stuff, the idea of something manifesting in a bedroom and all this stuff, even the red glowing eyes. There's a lot of people that we talk to who have had, encounters with what they consider to be a demonic entity, and those, the red eyes, all this, even the wings. I mean, now we're talking about angels and stuff, right? Like, or fallen angels. Like what is your thought on that? Is it a real creature, or is it something that's supernatural?
I found myself one time, usually when people ask me the question, I go through the various sort of manifestations or the kind of experiences people have had. And one time, I actually found myself saying, "It's an elemental," and then I said, "Don't ask me what an elemental is." Actually, John Keel used the term ultra-terrestrial and elemental interchangeably sometimes, but he would have told you he didn't know for sure what it was. There are many winged creatures, apparitions that people have seen. You had the Houston Batman in the 50s. It looked like some guy in a suit. There was supposed to be some guy flying over Coney Island in Brooklyn back 100 years ago. It's some kind of a contraption. There was the Wisconsin man bat that Linda Godfrey covered, some kind of big, ugly bat thing that a man and son saw when they went home. They got very ill afterwards. And a lot of people will see some kind of a winged creature and just automatically say, "Oh, well, it's the Mothman." But I don't think they're necessarily exactly the same thing.
Yeah, the ones that I'm fairly familiar with, at least the ones I've seen on TV and stuff like that, I believe it's down in Mexico. Where these winged humanoids, and actually some of them don't even have wings. It almost looks like literally a person just floating through the air.
Right.
Not like Superman or anything like that, but just standing upright, floating through the air, and they are bizarre. And I do think a lot of people are probably making the mistake of thinking that they're all the same thing. Because this Mothman thing, it seems like a very specific phenomena, or entity or creature or whatever this thing is.
Well, John Keel thought some of these things might be temporal. He talked about transmogrifications of energy, and that they existed temporarily and it sort of melted away. And he thought even that we might even co-create some of these things, UFOs. And he pulled everything together in a book called Operation Trojan Horse, which I resisted initially, but he was way ahead of it. So it's hard to, if it's right, if these things sort of manifest from I don't know, the Phantom Menagerie or whatever, it may be the same source, it may be the same energy. It may not always appear the same way, even though it is essentially the same thing. So we don't really know for sure what we're dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, to me, so the thing I start thinking about is like dimensions, right? Like, I think it's pretty well established that there are other dimensions. I mean, is it possible that this thing is an entity from another dimension that somehow makes its way into ours every so often?
It could be. Early on, John Keel started talking about window areas in an early book called Strange Creatures from Time and Space, which has been retitled The Complete Guide to Mysterious Beings. he was trying to come to grips with how some of these things just seem to show up out of nowhere, scare the hell out of people, and then kind of go away. And even when you talk about UFOs, when you look at the general shapes are similar. It's cigar shaped, saucer shaped, egg shaped, or whatever. But when you get down into detail, there are just hundreds of different variations. So how do we explain that? So, but then later on in Trojan Horse, he's really pulling everything together: psychic phenomena, cryptids, UFOs. If you are familiar with Stan Gordon's work, Stan Gordon of Pennsylvania, he wrote a great book called Silent Invasion, which covers some bizarre Bigfoot reports in southwest Pennsylvania, 73, 74. And these were some of these things would disappear in a flash of light when they were shot point blank with a gun. Didn't sound like the more flesh and blood type Bigfoots in the Northwest.
Well, even looking at the Mothman you have behind you, and I've seen this like in illustrations of Mothman before. I feel like I've seen that like in Native American like hieroglyphics, like the cave drawings and stuff like that. Are you familiar with anything that might suggest that these things have been seen in North America longer than we are aware?
Thunderbird was something out of their mythology, and people do see these large birds. And there's a book. A chapter in the Mothman Prophecies called, I think, The Flutter of Black Wings or something like that, where he goes through the litany of all these reports of different types of winged creatures. He thought that some of them were glowing. He thought that some of the glowing entities or whatever might actually be paranormal, as opposed to some that look more solid or whatever. There seems to be a duality there. There's one funny story about a series of giant thunderbirds seen around St. Louis in the 40s. And this one man, I forget his name, he said, "I've seen the thing 3 times in 4 days, and it's too much tomfoolery for a man of 50 to take."
Right.
Well, I don't know. Well, what about a man of 72? I want to know.
Yeah, the Thunderbird thing. So I grew up loving dinosaurs. I think, most young boys do. And that was one of the things that first got me interested in, cryptozoology or, this weird stuff going on in the world, was the idea that these Thunderbirds might be a pterosaur. Just like, the Loch Ness Monster might be a plesiosaur or whatever, cup of tea you subscribe to. So the Thunderbird thing, for people that might not know what that is, essentially a Thunderbird is just an abnormally large bird that people have claimed to have seen before. Is it any specific kind of bird? Is it, I don't think it's a 20-foot robin. I think they're implying it's like a huge eagle or something, right?
Yeah. I don't think, the thing that Tom Eerie saw was essentially a Thunderbird with a 10 to 12-foot wingspan. He couldn't identify it as any bird he knew. He said it was not an osprey. It wasn't a giant eagle or anything. But incidentally, we've got the Mothman Festival coming up in about a week, the 20th and 21st of September, every third weekend in September. But the following weekend, I'm going to be the MC at the Van Meter Visitor Festival. Now, the Van Meter Visitor is a book written by Chad Lewis, Kevin Nelson, and Noah Voss. They uncovered this bizarre series of sightings in 1903 in Van Meter, Iowa, just west of Des Moines, and now they've been having a festival to celebrate it. But this thing was essentially kind of like a pterosaur, a pterodactyl, but it had strange properties. It had a horn on its nose, but seemed to glow at night. It had some kind of a light, and it even to some people that were in close proximity to it, it would exude some kind of vapor. You can fill in your own joke there if you want, but it would give off something right, where people would have amnesia or missing time. So here you have this thing that produces a light, and there's missing time involved, maybe a parallel to some of the UFO encounters, I don't know. But it acted in some ways like a bird. It was seen perched on a telephone pole, and it climbed down the telephone pole using its beak like a parrot does. And one time when it was seen taking off, it didn't take off straight up like the Mothman. It actually had to flap its wings and kind of run to get airspeed, some speed to get up. And so, it's, and sometimes I wonder, why do we pursue these things? Because there's just no answers. it gets crazier and crazier.
Are you ready for a spine-tingling adventure? Ghost City Tours takes you beyond the tourist traps to explore the dark history lurking in your city's shadows. Our expert guides share authentic ghost stories, unsolved mysteries, and haunted locations that'll give you chills in all the right ways. Whether you're a skeptic or a true believer, you'll discover how fascinating local history with a supernatural twist can be. Book your ghostly adventure today at ghostcitytours.com, because the best stories happen after dark.
You know, I'm kind of like, the ghost guy or whatever, but I've always been interested in, Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, all these things. And I think a lot of it is just, the human need to explore and discover, and I was interviewing, I think it was, might have been when I was interviewing Matt Moneymaker a couple of weeks ago. And when we kind of touched on this, why are people so interested in this stuff? And, hundreds of years ago, I think the analogy I used was, hundreds of years ago, we can get on a wooden ship and travel to unknown lands. Like today, where's the mystery? Where's that stuff that really makes us human? And I do believe that is why a lot of people are drawn to topics like Mothman or Bigfoot or ghosts, because you're right. We're probably never going to know the answer, but I think that's also part of the fun.
But there are parallels between different types of phenomena. If you look at vehicle stoppages, for example, of course we have batteries go out in haunted houses. We have close encounters with UFOs where a car is stalled. But there was a case in the early 60s in North Cumberland, England, where a woman was in a taxi cab, and the taxi cab stalled, and they were watching a Phantom Army manifest, and it dissipated as it got to the cab, and then went away, and they could start the cab again. It was from the Battle of Otterburn from 1388, and the reason they knew that is because they could see the uniforms, and it had manifested before. There's a Bigfoot encounter in the W.D. Doc Priestley near the state forest in the 60s in West Virginia. And he's driving along, all of a sudden his car stalls. And he looks over to the left, and there's a classic Bigfoot standing there. And then his buddies see that he's not behind him anymore. They turn around and come back. It recedes into the woods. He's able to start his car again. So he takes off, and he goes some distance, and then his car stalls again. The engine starts to spark and burn out, and there's Mr. Bigfoot, either his kissing cousin or the same one, standing there.
Maybe he's a psychic mechanic and he just knows when to show up.
What's that?
So maybe Bigfoot's a psychic mechanic and just knows when to show up.
Well, it's just if there's more than one case. Stan Gordon has covered a couple cases like that, but he says nothing about it for months because he wants to come back to that area to hunt. And he's afraid if he tells his buddies he saw a Bigfoot, they're not going to come back. But several months later, he tells the story. So, and there's even more instances of vehicle stoppages.
Well, I think vehicle stoppages might be the least damaging thing that these things are accused of. Because Mothman, if you buy into the legend and all that other stuff, of course, you have to talk about the bridge collapsing, right? And I know that has been kind of wrapped into the Mothman story. So where do you sit on that? Do people really believe Mothman made the bridge collapse, or what happened there?
Some do. Some think he was a harbinger. And I've always complained, if you're going to be a harbinger, don't just chase people in cars and scare the hell out of them. Let them know the bridge is going to collapse, for crying out loud.
That would be the definition of a harbinger, right. Letting them know, yeah.
But be at least when a banshee shows up, somebody's supposed to die. When a Mothman shows up, what the heck? What does that mean? And, I don't think there's a direct connection. They examined the bridge and they said it was the 13th eye bar. Get that, 13th was defective. And I talked to one of the survivors that went down on the bridge, a truck driver that got out through the window, and a tugboat captain saw him and pulled him up, and he recovered in the hospital. But it was interesting because that it wasn't really the first sighting, but at November 15th sighting, 66, 13 months to the day later, December 15th, 1967 is when the Silver Bridge went down and 46 people lost their lives. We have a memorial here in Point Pleasant to that bridge collapse. And of course, the new bridge is a couple miles downriver, the Memorial Silver Bridge.
Now, why do you think people feel the need to associate Mothman with that? Is it just people being people, or is it
time and place? And some people do feel that there was a direct connection, and they could be right. I don't know, but the thing is, if there were more sightings of UFOs and Mothman afterwards, nobody gave a damn. They were focused on this horrible tragedy, losing friends and family members, and it devastated the town economically on top of everything. You had to drive miles up a...
Yeah, I was going to say Point Pleasant's not a big town, so 46 people, if they were mostly locals, everybody would have known somebody who perished in that accident.
Yes, and some friends of mine, Bill and Jackie Kousmelis, have written a book called Bridging the Tragedy. They interviewed people that lost family members and friends, that suffered the economic devastation, and how they overcame the trauma of that era.
Now, do you think, one, it kind of sounds like the company that built the bridge might have been totally playing into the Mothman idea. Like, oh no, it definitely wasn't our handiwork. It was definitely Mothman. Well, has Mothman been seen anywhere else other than Point Pleasant? People,
again, have seen winged creatures. I'm not sure it's the Mothman. There's a whole wave of claims in the Chicago area. But I tell people to be very, very cautious about that, because I have two sources from the Mutual UFO Network that told me that when those reports started coming in, pretending to come from different places, they were coming from the same IP address. There's quite an industry around the Chicago Mothman. A great researcher named Allison Jornlin went and boots on the ground. She checked many of the reports, and she found just a lot of things that are suspicious with that. So you can make up your own mind, but I kind of stay at arm's length from that.
We deal with the same thing, in the ghost world. When I was talking to, Moneymaker a couple of weeks ago, he said the same thing, about people that, they make up reports for attention, and it's, I guess it's just what people do, but at the same time, it's pretty discouraging, because there are those of us who take these things seriously, and we want to have real information. Sometimes it feels like the public's almost trying to play a joke on you, and it is disheartening. So I guess we would say Mothman itself is kind of restricted to the Point Pleasant area, whereas these other winged creatures that are seen maybe in Chicago or elsewhere, maybe those are completely different entities that are related, therefore people are thinking that they're the same thing. I think that's what we're getting at.
Well, he was seen in different parts of the Ohio Valley back then, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and so forth. But the Mothman did seem to be kind of have its own identity, even if we look at Keelian principles and suggest that many of these things are coming from the same source and manifesting in different ways sometimes. But it did seem that, there was another early sighting. A woman named Marcella Bennett went out to the TNT area with her brother, and the people lived out there. Some houses there. Some friends of theirs were out there. The Mothman story just hit. They thought, it's nonsense. We're going to have some fun and tap on the windows of our neighbors. And so they went out there. The friends weren't there. The children were. So they were leaving, and as they were going toward the car, this thing rose up from the ground. Classic Mothman. It scared the hell out of Marcella, and she actually dropped her infant child. The child was all right, but she had trouble. She couldn't make her legs work to get up and run toward the house. They got into the house. They locked the door. They called the police. This thing came up on the porch and was walking back and forth. So, of course, the police couldn't get there on time, but...
Yeah, that would be terrifying. Especially for a mom to drop her kid. Holy crap. That had to be something major.
I never spoke to her, although I spoke to several of the original witnesses. A friend of mine, Brian Seach, did talk to her at when she was at a Mothman festival years ago. And she told him, she said, don't ever let people tell you it didn't happen. I've seen long-form interviews with her on tape, and she's absolutely certain what is she? She's one of these people that wouldn't drive at night for years afterwards because it was so traumatizing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to say about that because, on the surface, it sounds so fantastical, rising up from the ground and all this stuff. But, there comes a point where, either these people are telling the truth or they're not. And if we're going to assume that they're telling the truth, which I like to do, that means that there is something really weird going on around Point Pleasant that's causing people to, create this Mothman phenomena. I don't even know what to call it. And I think for me personally, that's the most confusing part of Mothman. It's like, and I know we talked about it, we don't have to rehash it, but what the hell is this thing? Because the public perception is that, it's a winged humanoid figure, therefore, a real creature. But everything you're kind of describing does sound paranormal in nature, at least to me.
Well, look at the Skinwalker Ranch, the Bridgewater Triangle, Marley Woods. There's all these high strangeness areas where people experience not just one thing, but a whole variety of, you can go back to Wales in 1977, Dyfed, Southwest Wales. They had a whole series of beings in 7-foot beings in silver suits, egg-shaped craft, strange lights, little short guys that looked kind of like leprechauns associated with the same craft, only not wearing the green tunic. They had just, bizarre stuff. And there's sometimes, if you're familiar with Jacques Vallée, one of his early books was Passport to Magonia, where he makes connections between various traditions of folklore and some modern-day UFO experiences. There was a lot of that in Wales at that time that seemed to be sort of reflective of folklore from, hundreds of years ago. So it gets that even, makes the mystery even broader.
Well, do all these locations, or at least some of them, do they have anything in common? Like, Point Pleasant, for example. Is there something about Point Pleasant, whether it's the, geography or, a lot of people talk about all the limestone in the mountains and the water running through it, like all that kind of stuff. Is there anything about Point Pleasant that makes it stand out? That would
maybe some people are more up on that than I am about the geological structure. And even there's some parallels that run around the world where some people claim that there's a higher incidence of paranormal activity, but there may be much to that. I don't know a lot about that. And I don't think created the Mothman situation was Chief Cornstalk, the Shawnee warrior that was murdered. And supposedly he uttered a curse at the very end on the land, which turns out to be nonsense. But I think we should stop blaming Native American curses on these places and look elsewhere.
And Native American burial grounds for hauntings. It seems like everywhere that's haunted is a Native American burial ground. I was like, how many of these people were there? Native American burial grounds everywhere you go. So, the other creature that kind of comes to mind, or myth, or whatever it might be, when I hear Mothman is the Jersey Devil. It's kind of similar. This idea of I'm not an expert on the Jersey Devil, but from what I understand, it seems like it's smaller than human size, but it's kind of that same idea. A red-eyed flying creature. Like, are there any Jersey Devil sightings in Point Pleasant as well, or anything like that?
Well, I think Monster Quest did an episode where they put people under hypnosis that saw this, and they reported it had kind of a horse head and small wings or whatever. It's even kind of similar to in some ways, to the original chupacabra out of Puerto Rico, because those sightings seem to have red eyes and have more of a paranormal overtone. It seems like in Texas they were actually finding a real sort of a mixed or hybrid creature that didn't have any paranormal overtones to it. So, but yeah, that's another. But again, these things show up. Credible people see them, and then they just kind of dissipate.
Yeah, I imagine, I'm even trying to think of like what to say about it. It's just so strange to me, the Mothman thing. What got you into it in the first place? Because I've picked up on a couple of things you said. You didn't pick this up last year and become interested in Mothman last year.
No.
So
I'm about 2,000 years old, so I've been at this a while.
Yeah. I mean, because it sounds like I'm guessing you even moved to Point Pleasant to be closer to where all this happened, right?
Yes, I've been coming down for years. Back in March of 1966 in Michigan, we had a big wave of UFO sightings. And that was the one where Dr. J. Allen Hynek was still attached to the Air Force's Project Blue Book. And the Air Force wanted him to defuse the situation, even though Hynek had begun to believe that there was really something to this. He was an astronomer at Northwestern University. He came in as a debunker, but then he started to think, well, look, these people are very credible. So he trying to straddle the fence, and he suggested that some of the sightings in Michigan might be due to swamp gas. Well, I as a kid, I was watching that news coverage, and there was a collective groan throughout and a laugh. But later on, he separated from the Air Force, started the Center for UFO Studies. And but anyway, that was kind of a big deal for me as a kid. And then several months later, you had that first sighting of the Mothman, first major sighting. It was covered by the news. So that kind of got me going. And then I started reading and so forth. And we didn't have a lot of specials or documentaries back in those days. So that's how it pretty much started. But just as a postscript to that, 10 years later, in 1976, Dr. Hynek was speaking in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where some of these sightings took place, at the Weber Inn for the MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network Symposium. And the name of his talk was Swamp Gas Plus 10 and Counting. And it was a bit humorous, but serious as well. And he talked about the mistakes he made earlier and how things are going now. So he went from villain to hero after that decade.
Well, good. Well, so when you first started getting into Mothman, like what does Mothman research even look like? And, I guess the way that I think about this, so, if you're into ghosts, you go to a haunted place. If you're, into Bigfoot, you go to places where Bigfoot are seen. But Mothman is seen so infrequently, from what I understand. How do you even go about researching something like that?
Well, if you're looking to see Mothman, you're going to go on the TNT ride at the festival, because I'll have a guaranteed flyover of that guy, even though he's on a wire. It's too elusive. I find that people that are interested in this topic are more like me, looking at these high strangeness areas and interested in the parallels and so forth, and the patterns that show up with this type of phenomenon. So you have probably more of a broader interest. Although I do know of an individual that firmly believes in the Chicago Mothman sightings and think that Mothman migrated to Chicago. And I say,
for the better
I
weather?
don't think so. And here's one thing about the. I'm going to give again. I'm very skeptical of the Chicago Mothman sightings. I think some of them have probably been made up. But I'm going to give, if I'm right, I'm going to give them a pointers. Now, what you want to do is add in some paranormal aspects to these sightings, to make it more like 1961s. That might make it more believable. So maybe we'll get some of those.
Right. Yeah. Now everybody's going to do exactly that. Where do you think this is all heading towards? Is there ever a point where do you think more people are going to come out of the woodwork to claim that they have had encounters with this? Or do you think there might be some kind of breakthrough to help us understand what Mothman might be all about? What do you think is next?
Well, I think that's happening. There's what I tell people, there's no downside to Point Pleasant, the Mothman subject, the museum, festival. You can come have fun. There's no shame in buying a T-shirt to support the effort. There's the mystery there that you talked about before. That there's the true, really intrigue in trying to figure out what's going on. But on the other side, the more serious side, people like you're talking about, a lot of people have had bizarre experiences. Ordinary people experiencing extraordinary circumstances. You've talked to many on your show. And when they go into a place like this, even if they're just visiting Point Pleasant to go to the museum, they will be other people that have also had, if not identical experiences, bizarre experiences. And they can find out, you know what, I'm not alone, I'm not crazy. So it's, and a lot of people have come forward, after those first 100 or so people that John Keel talked to half a century ago, many more people have come forward. Of course, some people are going to be spinning tales, but not everybody. Not everybody just makes up stuff. So it's this is really really a good thing. You have the spirit of fun and adventure and intrigue, and then you have the serious side where people can say, "Oh, thank God, I'm not crazy. I don't need a psychiatrist."
Yeah, I think that especially over the last maybe decade or two, the general public is becoming much more accepting of the idea of like these strange creatures, whether it's ghosts or Mothman or Bigfoot or mermaids, maybe, I don't know. And it is a good thing, because I know that in when I was younger, I had my own experiences with different phenomena, and I never wanted to speak with anybody about it because I knew I was going to get made fun of, and that really, when that happens, that really restricts the ability to research these things and understand what they are. Because at the end of the day, without those data points, those reports and everything, without people coming forward and saying, yes, I've had this happen, it makes it very difficult for people who are trying to understand what that actually is. And, it is a great thing. I actually went to the Mothman Festival a number of years ago because I'm from just south of Pittsburgh, like a little southwest of Pittsburgh. So I'm not too far from your area. Spent a lot of drunken nights in Morgantown growing up. Like early 20s, we'll put it that way. It's just a lot of fun. And I think, for a place like Point Pleasant, I mean, it almost becomes part of your culture in a way, like, these festivals and this identity tied to this Mothman thing, whatever it is, and that's really how culture is formed.
Well, we've all seen how many towns and environs have exploited their local cryptid. Uh-huh. We have the Frogman festival, not too horribly far from here, and it's gotten very popular. People, a couple police officers saw something in 1972 come out of the Little Miami River.
It sounds like maybe just a lot of people in West Virginia were doing a lot of drugs in the 60s and 70s. Maybe that's what's going on here. So Frogman, I've actually never heard of Frogman. Now I have to ask. What I'm assuming it's a man frog, right?
Well, it's just a frog-like creature that came out of the Little Miami River. The officer was on patrol, and he couldn't believe what he saw. And they reported it 2 weeks later. Another officer saw one. That somebody saw something back in 1955, somewhat similar. And if you go back in history, the French were told tales by the Native Americans of some kind of amphibian-like thing that was in the area. So, but this guy just shows up a couple times. He gets a festival. How long did it take the poor Mothman to get a festival? It just wasn't fair.
Yeah, poor Mothman. Yeah, because isn't there a festival for the Flatwoods Monster too, or something?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, I think those festivals. At first, I never wanted to go to them because they just seemed, hokey. But I remember after I went to one or two, I'm like, okay, I get why people enjoy these. It's about the community, really. Whether it's the community that the event takes place in, or the community around the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblins from the 50s. The aliens that landed with the big heads, they've got their own festival. Everybody does. So, but again, ours is it's huge now. It's like 15 to 20,000 people go through Point Pleasant on the weekend, and we've only got about 4,000 or 5,000 people here. Yeah.
So
run out of hotel space.
But Jeff Walmsley has the museum. He has the Point Pleasant Trading Company. He has Bunker 304, which is kind of an old vinyl shop with a lot of music memorabilia. He and his family have just really revitalized the town. And I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, you've got to try to brave the Mothman Festival. This year, the 20th and 21st, we have speakers on Saturday and Sunday. T-shirts, food up and down Main Street, the perpendicular street, 4th Street, where the Mothman statue is. The speakers, they have their tables there, and they're very accessible. And what you have to do, though, is brave. One of the few things that cost a few bucks is the $5 ticket to the Mothman hayride. And you have to stand in line Saturday morning to get that. And Saturday night, we'll take you into the dreaded tea area. I'm one of the tour guides. And the men in black try to turn you away with bullhorns. Guaranteed fly over the Mothman. And I go in ahead of time and set up a bunch of spider webs and big, ugly spiders with their eyes lit up. So
that sounds like a lot of fun. There's a possibility I might actually be at Mothman Festival next weekend. We'll see. I gotta get back up to Pennsylvania to visit family, and my wife still doesn't have her damn real ID, so we can't fly. So I'm gonna be passing right through that area. We might just stop in.
Well, I will be the MC on Saturday and Sunday for the speakers, and I'm usually the last speaker on Sunday. You know, when everybody's driving home.
Right, yeah. The best for last, yeah.
This year I'll be talking about the high strangest aspects of the Loch Ness Monster and the journey of a man named Ted Holliday, who was investigating it and where he went through. So,
well, not that I want to dive into it because we don't have the time. So what is your thought on the Loch Ness Monster? I'm curious because that is the cryptid that got me into all this nonsense that I'm doing now.
Well, Holliday started out, the road opened up in 1933. He was just a kid. He was fascinated. People started seeing it because there was more access to the lake. He started out thinking maybe a plesiosaur, but then he thought, well, no, it's more like an oversized mollusk. It doesn't make sense. But then he found these really the high strangest aspects of Nessie that kind of puts it more in the realm of the paranormal. He went to Ireland to investigate some of these similar creatures. They call them horse eels. But these things were existing in lakes that were 20 to 30 feet deep and only a quarter of a mile long. How do they survive? So it's and then it gets into dove and whales and the investigation he did there. So it's going to be a really strange ride if you're not driving home and missing it.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, where can people learn more about you and what you have going on, Steve?
Well, I do work at the Mothman Museum on Saturdays. Just stop by. I'll answer any of your questions. And if you want your picture by the Mothman statue in front or in back, he's just as famous in back these days. I won't tell you why.
I think he's more famous in the back. Mothman's been working out.
You can get me on Facebook. Just type in Steve Ward, Point Pleasant. You'll probably find me.
All right, well...
Oh, I also have a podcast. I should mention that, I guess.
Yeah. What is your podcast?
The High Strangeness Factor on the Paranormal UK radio network.
Right.
Been around for several years, and we've talked to all kinds of people.
All right, Steve. Well, I really appreciate you joining us today, and I hope everybody learned a little bit more about Mothman. I learned a lot more about it. Like I said, this was one of those that I really wasn't too sure about. But, hopefully people will take up an interest, buy a book, listen to your podcast. And I guess the ultimate would be, let's get these people in Point Pleasant, West Virginia and be part of Mothman Festival, right?
Right. But come stop by and see me. You'll see me floating around somewhere.
All right, Steve. Well, I do really appreciate your time and your cat's time too. I haven't seen your cat for a while, but welcome guest. But all right. Well, I really appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you next time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks a lot, Steve.
This episode was brought to you by Ghost City Tours, your guide to the haunted side of history in over 25 cities nationwide. From restless spirits to unsolved mysteries, our tours bring the dead back to life. Book now for a haunted city near you at ghostcitytours.com.